the lighthouse keeper's wife. The rhythms of the fog. The world for Elizabeth was defined by the tower, not the busy nascent city of Reykjavik in 1901, but the slender, wind-whipped lighthouse that stood sentinel on the craggy point of Gardskagi. Her father was the official keeper, but Elizabeth was the true guardian, having spent her entire life attending the massive, intricate glass lens. Her hands, despite her youth, were strong and smelled of whale oil and polished brass. Life was a precise, unvarying rhythm, filling the tanks with paraffin, trimming the wicks, polishing the lens until it was a flawless, geometric eye, and winding the clockwork mechanism that rotated the light. Above all, there was the fog. The Arctic mist was a living thing, damp and suffocating, and the lighthouse was the only defense against the treacherous, churning gray sea. The isolation was constant. Days bled into weeks, punctuated only by the distant, mournful cry of the foghorn. Once a month, that silence was broken by the sound of a ship's S-horn and the rumble of a small motor. It was the supply vessel from the capital, bringing oil, food, and letters. And aboard that vessel was Einar. Einar was a young, quiet sailor whose face was perpetually wind-chapped and whose movements possessed the practiced, steady balance of a man who lived on shifting decks. Their exchange was always brief. He would check off the inventory with her father, and then he would seek out Elizabeth. He never brought her flowers or chocolates. He brought the sea's forgotten treasures. He would pull a gift from his coat, a pristine white scallop shell from a southern beach, a piece of green sea glass polished into the shape of a tear, or a tiny striped whelk. "What blessing does this carry?" Elizabeth asked him once, holding a dark, velvety mussel shell. "The blessing of the long journey that ends safely," Einar replied, his gaze meeting hers, a serious, wordless exchange that felt more significant than any spoken promise. The accumulation of quiet gifts. Their courtship was built on these monthly, fragile meetings. Einar's shells were not just gifts, they were milestones. They charted his voyages and her unwavering presence. She never spoke of her feelings, and he never pressed her for a promise of marriage. They both understood that their lives were ruled by powerful, unforgiving forces, the ocean for him and the light for her. The most precious shell he ever gave her was a rare, deep purple purpura from the far north. He presented it one October evening as the fog rolled in, thick and cold, shrouding the entire tower. "I carried this for 4 months," Einar told her. "I kept it in my pocket, and every time the journey felt too long, I remembered that the light was waiting." Elizabeth tucked the shell into the high pocket of her wool apron. "The light is always waiting, Einar," she stated. But her voice held a warmth that defied the cold air. She knew the truth. She was tending the light for all ships, but she was polishing the lens for his return. The night of the overload. The inevitable catastrophe struck just before the new year. A storm, sudden and vicious, blew in from the west. It wasn't just wind. It was a furious, ice-cold gale that made the granite tower tremble. Visibility dropped to nothing, a whiteout of sleet and foam. Elizabeth and her father were fighting the elements, struggling to keep the main oil lamp fed and the mechanism turning. Then a message arrived via the fragile wire-strung phone line from the Coast Guard. The supply ship, the Falke, had been caught in the storm on its return voyage. It had lost power and was believed to be taking on water, dangerously close to the treacherous lava shoals nearby. Elizabeth knew Einar was aboard. Her father cursed, adding more oil, but he knew the truth. The powerful Fresnel lens was focused for distance. Its beam was too high and too wide to cut through this kind of close-range, suffocating blizzard. Elizabeth looked up at the main steady beam. It was their duty, their sole function. But duty felt thin against the cold knowledge of Einar adrift. Ignoring her father's protests, she ran down the spiral stairs, her heart hammering. She burst into the ground storage room, which held the emergency equipment. Small, old lanterns used before the electric era, backup kerosene lamps and hurricane lights. She began to light them all. She dragged the heavy oil cans up the stairs, climbing past the main lens, up to the gallery. She placed and lit every small secondary lamp she could find, creating a circle of individual, low-burning flames around the external walkway of the tower far below the main beacon. She placed others in every window pane facing the sea, feeding them precious oil. She wasn't trying to create a single piercing beam. She was trying to create a wall of light, a lower, dispersed glow, a wide, luminous target that would cut through the horizontal snow and cling to the surface of the raging water. She overloaded the tower's capacity, sacrificing precious fuel for a desperate prayer. The Tower of Love's flame. Einar was in the icy water, clinging to a spar, the waves trying to tear him away. The air was a blinding white screen of snow and sea spray. The large, sweeping light of the main beacon was useless, passing miles above his head. He was ready to surrender to the cold and the dark. He closed his eyes, his fingers still numbly gripping the piece of driftwood. He felt the silver cowrie shell necklace he always wore digging into his throat. Then he opened his eyes. Through the curtain of white, low against the horizon, he saw it. Not a beam, but a scattered constellation of yellow light. A dozen or more small flickering flames gathered close together, shining with a low, intense warmth. It was a wall of hope that seemed to cling impossibly close to the water's surface. It was the light of the shore, and it was undeniably for him. He kicked and paddled toward that low, desperate glow with the last of his strength. He washed ashore hours later, exhausted, bruised, and barely conscious, but alive. He was discovered by a search party near the base of the tower. He didn't need to ask who had lit the small, frantic lights. He knew that only the woman who guarded the tower would have violated the rules of the sea to create an impossible beacon. They were married the following spring. As the ice finally broke on the harbor and the first green moss appeared on the rocks, Einar never returned to the sea. Instead, he became Elisabeth's assistant, his strong hands perfectly suited for the maintenance of the tower. Their wedding was a quiet affair, held inside the warm base of the lighthouse itself. They did not exchange rings. Instead, Elisabeth presented him with a perfect circle of polished sea glass she had collected, and Einar placed his precious northern purpura shell on the windowsill overlooking the turbulent sea. Their lightkeeper's home continued to guide ships for decades. The locals often pointed out the beacon to newcomers, calling it the Tower of Love's flame, because they knew it wasn't just oil that kept that light burning, but the silent, unyielding vow of the sailor who was finally brought home to the flame he guarded.